Good morning and good afternoon, and welcome to this conversation that is part of a report on 3.5 CBRS in the US and more generally dynamic spectrum sharing. Today, I'm talking to Qualcomm Technologies, who has been a strong proponent of spectrum sharing for a very long time, and they're also working on the CBRS right now. And with me today, I have Neville Meijers, the VP of Business Development at Qualcomm Technologies, and Patrik Lundqvist, the Director of Technical Marketing at Qualcomm Technologies as well. Neville and Patrik, welcome. Welcome to this morning.
Thank you.
Pleasure talking to you again. And can you tell us, Qualcomm does very many things, and but you've been interested in the spectrum sharing for a long time. So maybe you can provide us with some background in terms of what is Qualcomm doing in this area, and what is it you're personally involved with?
Sure. Let me start. I think right from a few years ago, when Qualcomm decided to put forward the proposal to share unlicensed spectrum, particularly 5 gigahertz, as part of a cellular-based option for licensed operators, basically to aggregate unlicensed spectrum. You've seen Qualcomm advocate in the market a strong position to leverage both unlicensed and shared spectrum, starting off with LTU and LAA, and now today with CBRS. And we are one of the founding members of the CBRS Alliance. We are very motivated and committed to ensuring that shared spectrum is a success in the United States. We believe that that success can lead to additional shared spectrum being made available outside of the US as well as within the US. We're very active participants on the CBRS Alliance. I'm a board of directors member. I'm the chairman of the board. And we believe that there is a huge amount of interest in ensuring that the shared access capabilities within this band are a success. And there's a lot of excitement, a lot of new business models that can be supported through this shared spectrum proposal, and we're really excited about the capabilities and the opportunities around us.
Yes, as Neville mentioned, we have been engaged in unlicensed and shared spectrum for quite some time, but I also want to mention that licensed spectrum is, of course, the lifeblood of wireless communication, and it's going to continue to be so. But spectrum is running out, and more spectrum is very important for this industry. So we are looking to provide technology that enables everybody to use the best use of any kind of license or spectrum type, licensed, shared, and unlicensed. And we're very excited about CBRS and the shared spectrum opportunities that it provides.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's not an one or the other. It's a question of coexistence and extracting as much value from a finite resource, which spectrum necessarily is.
And then the exciting thing about the CBRS Alliance and the shared spectrum is we have members who have licensed spectrum. We have members who don't have licensed spectrum, and there's a great deal of interest to utilize this CBRS 3.5 gigahertz, 150 megahertz of spectrum, both for the purposes of traditional types of services as well as new services.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really the interesting part is like you're widening the use of the shareholders here that traditionally have been not so active in use of spectrum. So maybe you can talk about a little bit what kind of innovation should we expect from CBRS in the US, and then we can talk about what happens in a sort of broader scale outside the US or outside of 3.5.
So I think you'll see the traditional mobile access, so leveraging the spectrum for mobile access. You'll see, of course, leveraging the spectrum for fixed wireless access as well. But then there are a whole new number of areas around private networks, whether it be a private network for enterprise, a private network for education institutions, private networks for industrial IoT. All of these capabilities are now enabled through this shared spectrum mechanism. And so, from traditional services all the way through to these new innovative ways of leveraging this technology in this shared band, I think a number of companies who haven't traditionally been players in the cellular environment are now very interested to become players.
Mm-hmm. So that's what's exciting about CBRS, I think, that any player can get involved because you don't need access to licensed spectrum. But as Neville said, of course, the mobile operators can utilize that together with the licensed spectrum. But the ability for any new enterprise or industry to use CBRS spectrum, we think is opening up limitless innovation. So that's what we're excited about.
Yeah, so let's look at it at the different opportunities here. So let's start with fixed wireless. That's what the band is already being used. Oftentimes it's residential access, but it's also going to be possibly used for backhaul, especially backhaul for small cells, right? Is that how?
Yes, I think the interesting part of this band is, depending on where the band is utilized, if it's used, for example, in densely populated urban areas, then it's likely to be used for traditional mobile access or for innovative type services. In rural areas, however, it's a great opportunity to provide additional fixed wireless services within those rural areas. And so you're going to see these mixed types of services depending on the environment in which the spectrum is deployed.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's go to the mobile operators, which is you can argue, well, this is just going to be a new band for them to use in addition to licensed bands, but there might be more than that because they might be using access at 2.5 in a different way. So, for instance, you can have indoor small cells deployments with a neutral host, so they can offer service, but it's not necessarily the same way they offer service through licensed spectrum. How do you see that potentially changing? So 3.5, is it going to be the same as a licensed band, or is it going to, what are the differences that you see?
I think you're going to see, the traditional way of using spectrum being, adopted by some of the mobile network operators. So carrier aggregation, a licensed aggregation of a licensed band with 3.5, or potentially LAA or ELAA aggregation as well. So I think where the operators believe that they need additional capacity, they need additional densification, they will deploy it in a traditional type of manner, whether it be outdoor small cells or indoor small cells. I think over time, as the market develops, these additional types of services like neutral host will become more and more commonplace. And I think those are largely going to be driven by the needs of the enterprise and the demands that enterprises make within their own relationships with the mobile network operators. So a neutral host network in a stadium, for example, or in a public space like a mall, those needs are going to really be driven by the interaction between those customers directly with the mobile network operators to provide a neutral host network.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so neutral host is an interesting application for CBRS because it's a very natural fit in terms of that the CBRS spectrum is not interacting with the macro networks. It's very attractive to deploy that in a venue to provide additional capacity or coverage, but you don't have to have an impact on back and forth with the macro network. So that is indeed a very good application for CBRS, but as Neville indicated, maybe not the starting point for deployments.
Mm-hmm. Now, how do you see that eventually to be implemented, in the sense that you see the venue owners, so it could be like a stadium, a mall, or an enterprise campus, paying for the infrastructure and then opening it to a mobile operator, so it's going to be a mobile operator or an independent provider funding the infrastructure and then sharing.
I think those business models are evolving right now. I think there are conversations going on. I don't think there's any fixed formula right now. So in the future, it may be the enterprise that invests in the technology. In certain areas, it may be the mobile network operator that decides to make that investment. I think right now the opportunity is open for new and innovative types of business models to be deployed.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess if you look at the enterprise, you can see a combination of both access for the sort of general subscribers, sort of mediated by mobile operators, but also applications that are specifically enterprise and that can be hosted on the same network, right? So it's not necessarily one or the other. So
definitely, the ability for an enterprise or a business or an industry, for example, to run a private network that then they make available for public access is actually part of the technology specification that CBRS has been working on. So definitely you will see initially potentially institutions that go and deploy the network for their own connectivity purposes, whether that be for communication, access to data, or IoT. And then over time, as I say, as mobile network operators decide to support neutral host, that potentially could be an additional service that they make available to their customers and to their own staff.
Now, there has been a lot of talk about private networks. Can you tell us about how do you see the opportunity there? What's in there for private networks?
Well, the opportunity is really to provide a network that has the capabilities that cellular is known for, but on a local basis. And so if you think about cellular and all the great innovation that has taken place over the last number of years in cellular, mobility, seamless mobility, extended coverage, the security capabilities within the network, the additional capacity that cellular brings, and of course the future-proofing of it. In the case of IoT, the ability to offer quality of service, all of those features make a local private cellular network very, very attractive. And this is the first time really where shared spectrum or on an unlicensed basis can be made available to actually host that private network. And I think that is where a huge amount of innovation is going to take place, whether it be putting a network into a factory, putting a network at a port or an airport or a logistics facility, a warehouse, an oil rig, a mine. There are a number of different places that you can innovate around this new technology capability, leveraging all of those amazing aspects of cellular.
Mm-hmm.
So what's attractive for these kind of deployments is that when you deploy a private LTE network, you're using dedicated equipment just for that application, for that user. That enables, first of all, you get independence of other traffic. There's no other user traffic that impacts your services, but it also opens the opportunity to manage your own network, and that allows you to customize LTE for the application that you're running. For example, QoS has a lot of parameters that can be customized. If you're running your own private LTE, you can then guarantee that you have mission-critical services running with a good high QoS with controlled latency while you're still supporting high bandwidth applications without impacting those important services. So that's something you can customize yourself for your services. That's what private LTE can give you.
Yeah, and I guess that's the enterprise often says that they want to have more control. They have specific requirements that obviously in a public network you cannot really put in place because you're much
Right.
more,
Exactly.
And often you'll want the data to be local. You may not want it to move out of the site in which the data is needed. And so, a local network, it brings that capability. The scalability is also there because these networks can be managed out of the cloud. So you can actually have an architecture such that the core network is cloud-based and virtualized, whereas the eNodeB is local, sitting on the site. And so that allows for a huge amount of scalability at reasonable cost.
Yeah, and that's a major enabler, because traditionally LPE is a little bit heavy on the management side. You need to have a core, and then so there's going to be more solutions allowing enterprises that are not mobile operators or service providers to have their own sort of inlined core.
The other interesting thing is, mobile network operators have already started this private IoT initiative. There are mobile network operators that are out there that are offering private IoT services, leveraging some of their license spectrum. But it would be, no surprise if the mobile network operators decided also to leverage the shared CBRS band for the purposes of private IoT networks as well.
Yeah, and it can obviously have a big role in providing and enabling that kind of transition. So I think that we're probably going to see a little bit of everything. Now, in terms of the sort of ecosystem, clearly this is a very different ecosystem that we're going to need in terms of supporting the deployment that we have for both either for Wi-Fi or license, because there are all new entities like the SaaS, the ESCs, and the different relationship between venue owners and spectrum owners. How do you see that being developed right now?
Well, I think the ecosystem starts with this very strong initiative that we have, the CBRS Alliance. We now have 47 members of the CBRS Alliance, and that is growing, week by week. In fact, we just held our annual all-member meeting, and there were 41 out of 47 members attending the meeting, 121 participants. We had 8 demonstrations, live demonstrations at the facility. And we had an open day where we had a number of prospective members come in. So there's a huge amount of interest in utilizing the band. And so that is, the first key to ensuring a healthy ecosystem. The membership itself is made up of both operators as well as vendors. And so a lot of the vendors, as I say, 8 different vendors were showing off their small cells operating in the 3.5 band at the event. So a really strong ecosystem, or really a strong start to the ecosystem. There are a number of SaaS vendors that are represented. So both the SaaS and the ESC vendors are there. And they're going to be offering their services to the eNodeB vendors and to the network operators. So I believe that we have a very strong and healthy ecosystem. Qualcomm itself announced support for the CBRS band 48, at Mobile World Congress, which is prior to Mobile World Congress. And that commercial support will be available in October of 2017. So I believe we have a very strong start to ensuring that the band is going to be commercially viable and successful.
How do you see that developing? So going back a little bit to the business models, do you think that the private networks will start ahead of sort of public access, or vice versa? How, in terms of timeline, how do you see that happen?
Yeah, so the private network has the benefit of that one entity or company is owning that network, and then can control both the device side and the small cell side. So we believe that's maybe an earlier start for CBRS deployments than what we discussed earlier, the neutral host, where you actually need a penetration of devices for that to be really effective.
Yeah, and I guess you can control it better, because if you're a small environment, you control end to end, you know what the devices are.
And it's not only about mobile devices in that environment. As Neville mentioned, a lot of these industrial IoT applications, you have devices from AGVs to gateways, so it's more about reliability, performance, and security that matters in those applications.
Yeah, but I guess sort of, in order to get like wide adoption among, like smartphone users is always takes some time because of the replacement cycle. It's just not even. It's not even if the handsets are out there, it doesn't mean that everybody has them.
Absolutely, and in these private environments, you're going to see a diverse set of applications. So, we're talking to customers about utilizing 4K video with edge analytics to do character recognition, object recognition, counting, etc. We're in conversations with customers who want to leverage drones within their network, customers who want to use augmented and virtual reality in order to enhance safety as well as enhance maintenance. As Patrik said, gateways, that's going to be a big area, we believe. AGV control within factory environments and other environments. And then, basic sensor data collection. So there's a variety of different use cases, some of them very heavy data use cases, and others lighter data use cases.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all quite interesting. Now let's look at it. What happens sort of like beyond the US and beyond 3.5 in terms of spectrum sharing. How is this going to fit in the sort of bigger picture of spectrum sharing?
Right now, I believe a lot of regulators are looking at whether we can make the CBRS band successful. If we can make it successful, we can put in the right SAS and ESC technology to protect the incumbents. If we can put forward a regime that allows coexistence of different types of LTE-based technologies, whether it be LTE-TDD coexisting with LTE-TDD, or LTE-TDD coexisting with LAA and ELA, that all needs to be put in place, and that is exactly what the CBRS is focused on, ensuring that there's a successful agreement amongst the various parties who are going to use the spectrum to make sure that the band is actually successfully deployed. I think once that happens, there could be cases where regulators make available spectrum on a shared basis outside of the United States, especially when it comes to 5G. I think there's a lot of interest in opening up additional, sub 6 gigahertz as well as millimeter waves for shared spectrum usage. And we're part of 3GPP, and we have been active participants in lobbying for the 5G new radio shared spectrum work item, and that now has been accepted by 3GPP and is now being worked on.
So how do you expect that to? Oh, sorry, Patrik, go ahead.
No, what's important with spectrum sharing is that it could open up more spectrum for use, because if there is spectrum that is likely used but it's going to take a long time to clear or cannot be cleared, this kind of capability will enable it to open up for both LTE and 5G use, as Neville indicated. So we think it's very interesting, important that we leverage this shared spectrum paradigm so we can use it in the future for more spectrum becoming available. Licensed spectrum still is the lifeblood, but this could enable more spectrum to be used for these kind of services.
I think the other interesting aspect is, we talk about shared spectrum. Some of that shared spectrum actually may be licensed. We have the PAL tier in the US, which is going to be a licensed tier. So you do have this capability to not only have shared spectrum that's unlicensed, but also shared spectrum that's licensed. And I think both of those are good ways to go to market with additional spectrum.
Absolutely. So yeah, it might become sort of the default that you start whatever spectrum you have, you might be able to share it depending on what the constraints are. Now in 5G, how do you see spectrum sharing to be different from CBRS? So in the sense of, what is the development in terms of technologies? What is that we're going to be able to do better, more efficiently as we move forward, as the technology advances?
Yeah, so 5G spectrum sharing, we're leveraging all we have been building as a foundation in LTE. Neville mentioned LTU and LAA, which is aggregating unlicensed with licensed. We have multifier that is LTE operating standalone in unlicensed, and now we have CBRS where LTE is sharing spectrum with incumbents. All these technologies we're now leveraging in 5G, and as Neville mentioned, We were just successful with other companies to kick off a study item in 3GPP for 5G in unlicensed, both when it comes down to LAA kind of operation as well as multi-fire kind of operation, a standalone 5G in unlicensed. And we are also going to take in the shared components that we have been developing as technology and make sure that 5G can support all the different spectrum trams, licensed, shared, and unlicensed, as well as Neville mentioned, we have sub-6 gigahertz and millimeter wave. So this is all components of the work we're doing in 5G spectrum sharing.
Now, is spectrum sharing going to become more dynamic as we move forward?
Yes, that's one of the aspects where we see innovation being possible. The more dynamic and adaptive we can be, the more higher spectrum utilization we can achieve. So that's absolutely part of the equation.
Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us, Patrik and Neville. It was great as always talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
So this conversation was part of a report on 3.5 CBRS spectrum sharing, and it's by Sensafili and in collaboration with RCR Wireless News. And thank you all for attending, and have a good day.